Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate being here. I appreciate everyone coming in and spending an hour of your time with us. I want to make this as valuable for you as possible. And I want to be able to interact with you so we can get a kind of a pulse so I can make sure I'm giving you information that's relevant to you. But today, I want to be able to bring it from a big perspective, a 30,000 point view, and I want to bring it down to how this can apply to you, what you can do after this session to apply it in your day-to-day work life after this session, directly applying all these principles. I'm going to try to simplify it and take away the confusion around like unscrabbling cybersecurity so it can be understandable to you as you navigate this digital landscape that we are now in, that's like overwhelmingly overpowering our life in every way, right? So we're going to cover security awareness foundations. We're going to cover the common threats that are in the industry today that impact you. So they not only impact your organization, but these impact you. And I want that to be our message today, is what this looks like for you as an individual, as an employee at your organization, and then as your organization. So we want to talk about ways that you can secure your work environment. And then we also want to talk about those best practices. And those are really important because in anything that you're in, especially in this digital landscape that we're in, there is best practices. And so we've transformed our work world, but we have missed a few different important pieces to make that very secure in terms of the way we interact with our software, our devices, and our data. So we'll talk about that as well as a checklist. So the round security foundations, I want to be able to bring it to we're going to have a bit of a paradigm shift today. And what I mean by that is we have really figured out how to physically secure ourselves as a physical being, right? We secure our home. We have locks on it. We have security systems. We secure our money. We have it in banks. We have it in investments. We secure our children with special seats when we have babies. We secure ourselves with seatbelts. We have it figured out because we understand the risk involved when we get in our car, so we know why we should wear a seatbelt. What happened over the last couple of years is we had to move quickly and transition quickly to working from home, working remotely, and working on our laptops, and took away from that brick and mortar interaction or hard copies of paper and pen. And we have had to move to this digital front for a lot of our workload. So we've moved to the cloud for some of the applications we've used. We've moved off premises to be able to allow us to work from our home. But what that means is we've expanded our environment of where we work. And that means we've made this easy for us to work from home, but we haven't thought about the security measures of working from home or working from a coffee shop or working from Hawaii if you're going on a vacation and you want to, do a little work while you're in your hotel, right? Because we can do this now. We have this ability. Our laptops are now an extension of us, and it can go wherever we go, which means our work can go wherever we go. So there's some pluses with that, but then there's also some concerns with that. So we're going to talk about what that looks like. And so I want to break down a couple of terms that you might have seen in the news or just reading articles that have been commonplace. And I want to break them down for you so you understand why you can pay attention to these and understand and why these apply to you. So we have a lot of different cyber attacks that are happening. And in the landscape that it is now, it is a common term that it is the malware that is doing these type of attacks. So just imagine, since we're very familiar with viruses and how out of control a virus can be and how we can't really pigeonhole it to say, well, this virus will do this, so we know we can do this. Malware is exactly the similar concept. It's created for malicious intent, and it's created with different intent, but it is to do damage to a computer or server or a network. So your computer, right, or the software you're using, it can go into there and wreak havoc depending on what its purpose is, but it's malicious. And then what happens is the industry names these types of malware just like you would name a virus. So they, wiper malware, WannaCry malware. And so you might hear these terms, and what that is that's just a deduction. Or, we name our hurricanes, right? Hurricane Katrina, that was named. So everything that has a common threat level, we name it. And so malware has a name, the type of malware that it is. We also are running into the fact that this type of malware causes a lot of different types of data breach. But what does that mean to you? And that means the information that you touch, the data you touch, so you're going to touch all sorts of data in your day, right, in your workday. And so I want you to think about that personally as you're like listening to me, and you're going to go back to your work and you're going to go interact with data. What information are you touching every day? So it's confidential, it's sensitive, it's only authorized by you, possibly, maybe one other colleague, maybe two, but it isn't for a whole organization. You have kind of tiers of access, right? But those files, if they're all accessed by an unauthorized user, that's considered a data breach. And they have other names for it, right? Like cyber incident, data loss, data leak. But data is essentially any of the information you touch that you know can only be allowed to be seen by you or a few other colleagues. And it could be product trade secrets, like think about Coca-Cola and their secrets, their secret recipe to make Coca-Cola. If that got accessed by an outside user, that would be considered a data breach because they were having a trade secret, a product secret that was revealed to the public and then could get leaked to the public, and then anyone could make that version of their product. So they guard that with utmost care to protect that because they know it is valuable in the marketplace, because it could be duplicated and it no longer brings value to the product if it's essentially stolen. And so you think about the data you touch and what is confidential, and let's just calculate what would that be. So if you're looking at data, I want you to take your phone and put your camera up to the QR code, and I want you to pull up this question, and I want to ask you, what data do you interact with regularly? So starting with like what your day looks like today. Are you touching financial records? So if you do, please choose that option. If you choose customer credit cards, HR records, client information, what data do you touch? Yes, financial records. And that's very confidential, very confidential. You can't have that information out, right? Client information, it could be their SIN number, it could be their health records, it could be anything in terms of what's private to them, right? You know what's private, anything that determines your personal identifiable information, your name, your address, your phone number, your birth date, your SIN number, and that's all considered private information. And only you and authorized users can touch that, right? So this is excellent. So customer credit cards, very important. That is a high risk because it's high value. You can steal a credit card. You can make numerous different types of purchases. So those of you who touch the credit cards, you have a very big responsibility. You who touch the financial records, you have huge responsibility. You who touch the client information, you have a huge responsibility. And you may not have known that. Maybe you have. Maybe your CEO or your manager has made that clear to you. But I'm telling you today, you have a new responsibility. You have a different level of accountability now, because what we have now is the access of information you have. We have become aware that hackers now have access to that. And why do they have access to that? Well, because we've just expanded our world. We are now global. Like I said, we could go work in Hawaii and access our files. So if we can access our files, that means the hackers can access our files. How do they access your files? Well, we'll talk about that. So right now, small organizations are at risk, and never before has it been this high, but 58% of attacks are against small organizations. And that number is going up. So it isn't just the big organizations that have all the money and all the resources. They aren't the ones that are target now. It's the smaller organizations, because there's lots of gaps inside of the organization that these hackers can find. And these hackers use all sorts of tools, and they have all sorts of resources and all sorts of time. And all they have to do is scan a network, because like we say, we're all connected to the internet. The internet doesn't have a border and it doesn't have a door. We try to secure our organization, and our IT company or managed service provider would do a lot of that security for us, right? Protect you to set up your systems properly, set up your network with a firewall. So there's all sorts of technology that's in place, but hackers have ways to break through those. And now they're looking at small organizations as a perfect prey. So what happens is there's a high cost to that. Like $141,000 is the average cost of downtime for one of these unauthorized access points where a hacker gets into your organization. That's a lot of money for an organization. You know, can you afford that? And sometimes if you're attacked, you don't even know it. You don't know a breach has occurred inside your organization, that a hacker has installed malware in your organization or a stolen data, because it can take an average of 206 days before an organization will even recognize that, because it can be in there in your organization, and you can keep working and log into your Office 365. You can log into your Bamboo software, your Sage software, whatever software that you're using in your day-to-day work that could be accessed by you, but also accessed by hackers if they know how to break in, right? So it's a digital break in now. It's not like a bank robbery where they bank into a brick and mortar. They break into your software, and they have all sorts of savvy ways of doing that. And so that impacts your work, because if they break into your software that you use and then break into the data you touch and then take and steal your data, you're at the mercy of what these hackers have done and what they're stealing. So these threats are very interesting, because what happens is they may mean something to you, and we'll go through a few of them, but there's many that I won't be able to cover today, but we'll go over some of the ones that would be interesting because they apply to you every day. So some of you have heard of phishing. Phishing is very common, and the reason we keep talking about phishing, and you may read it in all sorts of articles or just see it pop up, is because it's getting more and more common to the average user, which is you. Why is it getting more common? Because it's easy for this type of hacker to actually launch these kind of attacks, and they do it through email, and they pretend to be someone else, and they call it social engineering, and it's just an attempt to acquire sensitive information from you. And they do this via email. They find this a very effective way so they can get something from you for free with no efforts on their part. They just pretend to be someone else, and they can get that information from you, and then they can get inside your organization. So right now, 36% of these breaches involve phishing. So it's actually like very clear that outside of the technology piece, they're just coming in by sending you an email that looks like it's attractively interesting. You want to respond to it. You think it's real. You think it's from somebody you know, and they trick you. Then there's the other aspect of how do they trick you? How do they know what to do? Well, they do reconnaissance. And why would they do reconnaissance? And once again, I'll go back. They know this is a very effective measure of an attack. It's like the low-hanging fruit concept, where they know if they launch a second attack and they can do some information searching on your company. If you think about your company website, what's on it? Is the company phone number there? Is the company email address there? Are there photos of all the staff, of all the leaders? So once you realize some of the public facing information that's there, you see it, but so does a hacker. And then they can go dive in. So like Jessica, they can go find your information on Facebook, or they could find your information on LinkedIn. Or Ronald, they could do the same thing about you. Like, where does Ronald work? What does he do? What's his position? And then they know, well, okay, so now I know its position. I look at the company website, I can figure out the email domain, and then they figure out who all works there, and then they can launch a phishing campaign against you. And it can have this attractive approach, right? Like, oh, you just got won a gift card, an Amazon gift card. So they trick you with positive approach now. They used to do a lot of like, oh no, something's happening, you have to click here now. But now they're revising it. And what's happening is they're constantly revising their approach, because we're like, oh, we just know that's a spam email. But they want to keep investing in this so they can keep seeing who will take the bait. And this works, and it's not going to go away. So I would tell you right now, if you can consider this as a new approach of, you know, an annoyance, let's be honest, this is annoying that you have to double check your email because you're like, is this a real email? But if you expect it, then it won't be so surprising, and it won't be so off, you know, it won't throw you off, and you won't be confused by it. But just to know it's coming, it's common, and you are an interesting target to them. Even though you would say, I don't really have anything that would be interesting to them, it's not about you as a human targeting you specifically like Jessica or Ronald. It's just the idea is that you're your target because they know where you work and they know what you do. They found that out easy enough. So they're like, well, let's just try this. Let's just try to trick them with an email. And then also when it comes to executives, they'll try to pretend they're an executive and then trick you to say, okay, I'm so-and-so, your CEO, and they'll send you an email and say, please send me those financial records. I want the quarterly report and I want this and this and this. And you could easily send that to them because you think it's them. And so that also is very effective. And so that's not stopping either, because these hackers understand the return on investment, their time versus what they get in return is very, very effective. So for you, that leaves you vulnerable, because now that means this type of phishing kind of attacks means it's just targeted at you. And this is true. So we're going to give you some tips and tricks as to really what to look for. And there's really easy ways to navigate this so you don't feel like this is a big threat and this is going to change the way you work. It's just a few different measures. And you do a little bit of a paradigm shift and put on a bit of a different kind of view towards email and instant messaging and as external communication, you'll be well equipped to navigate this. What we find is the common occurrence is just having fake logos. How easy is it to copy a logo? It's easy to have a very generic introduction. So then you go, okay, well, my boss would never send that kind of introduction to me or that email, or my colleague wouldn't say that, or they would give you a link. Very common to give you a link or an attachment. They'll have suspicious URLs. They'll have all sorts of weird actions for you. So like, I have a TD bank. So if TD sends me an email, I'm instantly suspicious because I'm like, nope, TD doesn't send me emails. They send me secure messages and it notifies me there's a secure message. I have to go to my TD account. I have to log in that way, and then I can see the secure message. And so I know that would be a fake email, right? So you just have to use this, like put on these new lenses that go, okay, I'm just going to verify, and I'm going to, if I doubt, I can delete it. And it's just that simple. If you doubt, you can delete it, because they're just looking for you to click the link, download the attachment, and then they win. They have that victory. But you don't have to do any of that. That's the best part. You actually just have to delete it, and then you've done your part. So right now they want, like 96% of these come via email. They want passwords, they want usernames, they want PIN numbers, they want personal data like names, addresses, emails, because those are valuable. Those are valuable data points that they can collect and use for their own gain. And even though it doesn't seem like that would be useful for anyone outside of your organization, is very valuable. And so what we know is data is the new currency. It has a high value of exchange on a marketplace that's called the dark web. So you know that if it gets taken from you, leaked and stolen, it's going to be sold elsewhere for money. So they want medical information, insurance. And the reason they want this is because it can kind of hold you hostage as well. So if they steal data, so let's say they steal your credit card information, they say you can find out they have your credit card information, hold you hostage to do what they want you to do. And so this is where ransomware comes in. So we call it kidnapping of data. And they do this so that they essentially imagine, so Ronald or Jessica, imagine you log into your computer tomorrow morning, and you're going to go log into Office 365, check your email, and then you're going to go into another software like SharePoint, download some reports, and then you're going to go to another software. And what if you couldn't log into any of those applications and you were locked out? And you're like, okay, well, I'll try my phone. Well, okay, I'll try another device. And then you call your colleague and you're like, I can't get in. What's wrong? And you kind of start to panic, and they go, I can't either. That's what this is. They lock you right out of every single application that they have access to inside your organization. And then they give you a little pop-up note that says, you no longer have access to your system. And again, it will be a matter of what kind of system you have, but this is how tricky they are. They're very, very sophisticated, and they will tell you you have to pay a cryptocurrency for a certain amount. Again, they have no scruples. So they could say, we want you to pay 200,000. So could you afford to pay 200,000? Like, Shelley, would your company have 200,000 just to pay a ransom tomorrow to get your data back? Because that's the deal. You pay them 200,000 and they will give you your data back. But if you don't pay that 200,000 by Friday, you won't get your data back. And that means you won't get into your system and you won't have access to do business. Your services just shut down, and you have to explain that to your clients. You have to explain that to the rest of your team, like your CEO does. You're pretty much handcuffed. You can essentially no longer work. Can you afford that? Of course, your organization doesn't want to afford that. That's not what you put in any business plan for projections for this upcoming year of expenses and in your budget, in your line item. But because ransomware is becoming so common, it is an honest threat for all sides of organizations. And now it is the conversation of what if we get attacked? Can we be prepared for this? And what does that look like? And you're not usually prepared because it comes when you least expect it. You wouldn't necessarily log on to your computer tomorrow and go, I'm ready for a ransomware attack. I'm ready for my data to be stolen. And I'm ready for us to pay 200,000. Like, you're not, right? No one wants this to happen, just like you don't want your house to be burglarized. But the problem is this is hitting all sides of organizations, and the cost is so high because they ask for these obscene amount of dollars in cryptocurrency and won't let you have access to your system until you actually listen to them. So there's a lot in place here because what you're up against is very sophisticated hackers, and we call them ransomware gangs, and they orchestrate themselves to provide a service, and it's called ransomware as a service. That ransomware as a service is that if I know how to hack a password because I use the tools that I know how to use, that it's called brute force attack to steal your password, I can get into all your systems because you might have a password that was easily broken, and I can break into that. But if that's all I can do, then I might need someone to hire who can create malware. I might need someone to encrypt data. So I would hire a team of people to do this, and we are be a ransomware gang, but we're going to do this ransomware as a service. And there's affiliates, and they all do their work to be able to navigate. Okay, you go search organizations, go search healthcare organizations, and see who's got vulnerabilities in their organizations where we can break into their system, their network. And this is why a managed service provider is so valuable, because they do the 24/7 monitoring of your network and can put up enough security measures in your network so that if a hacker is scanning in your network, they wouldn't see vulnerabilities. And those vulnerabilities are like a back door. You know, if you go on vacation and you leave your back door open, that's a vulnerability to your home. You would never leave your back door wide open if you left for a week. You would never do that. But this happens in organizations all the time, mistakenly, because that's where data, unfortunately, we're in a digital landscape where you can't protect everything all the time. So we have to be aware that there's just going to be vulnerabilities. And so then what happens is these type of attacks cause massive downtime, damage to your reputation. If you can't actually do your work, you can't service your clients, and you have to tell them, sorry, we're not able to, process your payment today, but we can take it down on paper. And then more than anything, what if you can't even access any client information because you had it all in one software? Like you wouldn't have it written down anywhere. And so do you have a contingency plan for that? So there's a lot of unpredictable expenses. If you were to stand up your business manually, you would not be prepared for that. We used to operate manually, but then we went digital. Like I said, we went so fast, so quickly, but do we have everything manual? No, we don't. This is easy to have everything digital in the cloud or on our devices, software. So, but we now have to look on the other end of going, okay, we have to talk about how we prevent such a problem. If we lost all of our data or lost all of our contacts, or lost all of this information. And so right now, the first quarter of last year, so from the first half of 2021, January to June, $590 million was reported that was paid out by victims of ransomware attacks. And that was what was reported. You have to understand there's still quite a negative connotation around reporting a ransomware attack. It's becoming a bit more acceptable because we're now looking at it isn't a personal attack against your organization, how small or large. The Colonial Pipelines or the Cisco attack. There's all sorts of attacks. I can list them. I can just give you a list long of all types of ransomware attacks that have happened over the last 6 months, let alone the last year, that have been astronomical. Colonial Pipelines out of the US had to pay over $400 million out to a ransomware gang because that's what they asked. And in order to get their data back, that's what they had to pay. So some organizations have a hefty fine to pay in terms of getting their data back. And so that reputation loss is huge. 45% of the gas stations were closed for 5 days because they had to shut down all their systems and people couldn't get fuel and were outraged. So that reputation to them just was really, really damaging. Their operational costs, they lost millions of dollars just not being operational. And so they had to report it because it was such a high amount. And so in Canada and the US, they're making this mandatory to seek outside support from the like FBI. There's a ransomware task force that's established that can give you enough information. There's free reports and free information. If you just type up ransomware task force, you will see that the RCMP is part of that, and they collaborate with other organizations in the US too, so that they can create enough information to bring awareness to your organization to prepare for this. It's like preparing for a fire. You don't know if a fire is going to happen or a flood, but you prepare for it. You have all contingency plans. You have fire escape routes set up, posted on your walls in your office. You know exactly what to do. This is the same thing. They're asking organizations to prepare for a ransomware attack because it possibly is going to be inevitable the way that this is moving, the way these gangs are expanding, and they're not detectable. They can't be detected. The way they operate is so stealth and so sophisticated, they're not detectable. So I want to be able to explain how this looks on this criminal end, that why this impacts you. And it impacts you greatly, and it will continue to impact you greatly as an individual, because what happens is, think about Amazon. That's the surface web. We go onto Amazon and we go buy a pair of shoes, right? Easy peasy. Log in, put your credit card in there, and you log out. Then there's the deep web, and that's 90% of the web, which you may or may not have operated in, and that requires a password to get into. And that's where I would say investigative reporters would operate, where they have private, confidential information they have to trade with other informants. And so they protect themselves from that. It's not easily detectable. It can't be found, right? It's private search. But then there's the dark web. And the dark web is where this is the dark marketplace, where these criminals, these ransomware gangs, sell their products, and their products are data, your data. So I'm going to say, Jessica, you just got your credit card information stolen. It's going to be taken and it's going to be sold on the dark web. What's sold on the dark web? All sorts of items are sold on the dark web. And that's why this data, that's the new currency. The currency is cryptocurrency, and this is the marketplace. So you're going to find here that all sorts of data is going to be sold here. And you see, there's drugs, all sorts of drugs, because that is a very common place for drugs to be sold. There's numerous marketplaces. This one is called Royal Market. It's live, it's active. You could set up an anonymous account and you could go there. Please don't. It's so dangerous. Don't do it. But the bottom line is that you can find enough information by Google searching these dark webs to find out how many markets there are and what they sell. And you can see they sell numerous products, but you could see they sell fraud products. They sell digital products. That means that's that ID. That's the credit cards. That's the licenses, whatever they've stolen from a company. They just put it here and they sell it. And there's buyers, hundreds of thousands of buyers. These marketplaces make millions of dollars a month. This one marketplace would make millions of dollars a month because they have thousands of sellers on there, and then they have thousands of buyers. So they just set up their accounts with anonymity, complete secrecy. There's no trace to them. And then these people who come on and buy the same thing, so it's not traceable. So FBI and all these task force come and try to set up sting operations, but they're hard to nail down and hard to close down. And when they do, what happens is they pop up again. It's impossible. Alpha Bay was one that was taken down. It was $1 million. It was such an incredible takedown because it was a very successful marketplace, but they just came up and now they're Alpha Bay too. So you can see they're on the marketplace and they sell and they're just as successful as ever. And they are not taken down yet. So they have a way to operate so they can be protected and they don't get shut down. So you can see that there's no consequences to these type of criminals. Whereas when you're looking at like above ground drug criminals, that's very tangible. They can be busted and they can be jailed, right? Or terrorists, they can be eventually found and then they can be jailed. We're dealing with a whole different beast here. And this is what you and I are up against. We're up against these kind of criminals. So I call them terrorists because there's nothing personal about this, but they're after each individuals for their own gain. So for you, this means you kind of have to be aware of that threat landscape. So you know that actually what you do matters. What your work is it does have value. Even though you're offering your services to a client and you're working for a company where you're bringing value, it's more than that now. It's that you have to protect it in a different way that you ever thought you had to protect it. And you have to consider these costs are high if this happens to you. So let's talk about the prevention, because it's way cheaper to prevent this type of incident than to fix it after. So right now, the simple solutions for you are it's very simple, is our version of modern authentication. We believe passwords are everywhere and they're a pain in the butt. You have over 90 passwords to memorize in all of the applications you use. So one, do you follow the guidelines of 12 characters, no similar passwords? You don't have them saved on your computer. You don't reuse passwords? Of course not, because how do you memorize 90 passwords? How do you keep more than 12 characters and then memorize that? So will you reuse passwords? It's like very common, right? So what we're talking to you today about is I want to ask you to become a human firewall. What does that mean? That means that you have to become aware enough to say, I might have to be the first line of defense for my organization because an attacker, a cyber criminal, is looking at me as the first line of getting inside my organization. They're going to see you as like 80% of the cyber instances are caused by human error. So it says uninformed employees, but truthfully, it's also human error. If you click on a link in an email because you think it's from your boss, that's just error. You don't know that's not the right link to click. But if you can take a few minutes of your time to realize, if I hover over that link to make sure it says what my boss says it is, and it's a valid link, then I can click on it. And then that takes 5 seconds of your time. So it's just taking different measures and taking a few extra seconds to be aware and understand that you are now a target. So if you can be that human firewall and go, what should I be doing differently every day before I start my workday? And so what we want to say is, back to passwords, you need to understand passwords are very challenging to navigate. So we want to give you tools and tips to be able to navigate passwords, because that is a weak link for you if it's a reused password from your Facebook account to your Office 365 account to your other applications. So then a hacker can just find his way in from one account to the other, and he's in. Do you see the trail, how easy that is? So that's why we say have different passwords for each account. But 90 passwords, impossible to manage, right? So we talk about using a password manager because you need to have somewhere to store it. And that's where you're going to need some help, right? So we also talk about the idea around multi-factor authentication. Now, I'm sure many of you used it a few times. So I ask you right now, if you could put your phone up and scan this image, a QR code, and tell me, how often do you use multi-factor right now? Where is it pushed and enabled inside of your workday where you use multi-factor authentication? And that's where it verifies that you're the actual user. You know, it sends you a text to say, punch in this one-time password on this application, and then you can get in. So occasionally 10 to 50%, never, or I don't know why I need to use it. So I'll give you a moment to answer that. Awesome. Yeah, and it's most of the software application can enable it. So 50% of the time for some of you, occasionally for 20%, yeah. And the thing is there's a lot of applications out there that don't make it mandatory, but like, let's say your Amazon shopping account, you can easily enable multi-factor on there. And I would, when it comes to anything that has for critical accounts, money, work, health, I would say enable multi-factor authentication today. And when it comes to password manager, you would say enable that, set up that password manager today, and then you can get 5 critical accounts in a password manager. And LastPass is a great password manager. It really does work. It is a place where it's like a vault, and it puts all your passwords in there, and it actually secures them so that it encrypts it and they can't be hacked. So it's very secure, and you can put all your passwords there. It helps you recreate passwords, helps you set up new accounts with new passwords, and you don't have to have to memorize a single password except for the one password you set up with LastPass. You set up that one master password and then you're set. So at first it might seem a bit weird, but we're all familiar with using new applications. We install and add new apps all the time. This is one more, but this one could take away a huge headache for you. You can memorize one password. And I use it on my phone because I bring my phone everywhere, and then I can just go, okay, I have to set up a new account. Then I can just set it up and use LastPass, and then it saves it for me. And then whenever I need to log into that account, it helps me launch it because I can give it this change the settings, so it helps me. But then I don't have to remember a password, and we have passwords for every account, so we have to do this. And until our world changes and we don't need passwords and you know, besides single sign-on, that isn't on every account, so we still have to use passwords. So in the meantime, let's choose a very secure method of using passwords, and a password manager is the way to go. LastPass is one that we use, but there's, you know, you can look up the top 10 password managers out there and you'll see numerous ones, but LastPass is in the top 4. So it's a very credible one, and it's very economical as well. So I would encourage you to download LastPass Manager and install 5 of your key accounts there, like set up your banking and your health and your work accounts, and use that from now on, but setting up new passwords. 5, just start with 5, and then you can get familiar and comfortable. And then as you're adding new accounts, you just do it through your LastPass Manager. And before you know it, you'll have all your passwords there, and you'll never have to think about it again. But then that's one way you stop the hackers, because they can't break into your systems if you have a different password. They'll get stopped. Oh, they'll get stopped at your Google account because that password isn't the same as your Office 365 account, or your Facebook account isn't the same as your Office 365 account. So you see where I'm going with this, right? You need to stop them. And this is the part where you can be that human firewall and you can stop them. And then now add the other layer of the MFA where you stop them if they do hack into your Office 365. You have multi-factor enabled. They have to verify it's you. And if you do a push notification on text, then you can say, well, I didn't log into my Office 365 account. Why am I getting a text right now that's telling me I need to say yes, I verify access? Then you know. Don't verify that. That means you have been breached, and you can change your password, log, and make sure that you don't accept that, and you can be protecting yourself. It's very simple steps, but just being aware, knowing that you have to be a little bit more diligent, a little bit more aware, and a little bit okay with thinking, if I doubt this, I might need to do something differently. And you delete or you change password, but you don't have to succumb to like, oh, it must be something I did wrong. No, it's a system where hackers are going to trick you in every which way to make you think it's something you did wrong, when it's actually them trying to trick you. And Wi-Fi, one thing is very common with Wi-Fi, since we're able to use this anywhere, airports, coffee shops, hotels, I would just say, don't use Wi-Fi for anything confidential. So if you're going to use banking or any work or do any type of work with your data, don't use Wi-Fi. Just don't. You can watch videos, you can, you know, be on social media, but be careful, because Wi-Fi is easy for hackers to be able to sit in a coffee shop, set up a Starbucks account, and then you think it's a Starbucks account, you're logging into it as a Wi-Fi account, and it's actually a hacker's account sitting across the room from you, and it's a 17-year-old kid. And you think he's just writing a paper, and actually he's stealing all your passwords and all of the information that you're logging into. So it's that easy. I'm sorry to say, but it is that easy. That's the tools that are out there that are accessible to anyone who has enough knowledge. And 17-year-old kids, they have enough knowledge now. And maybe you know some kids that are that savvy, but that if they don't know what to do with these tools, they'll use them for harm. And that's where it comes in, and they start places like coffee shops. So the summary for you today is that if you can go today and consider, I'm going to be a little bit more aware, I'm going to take a few seconds to double check my emails. I'm going to just double check my email address, who's sending it to me, my sender. I'm going to double check and verify that it's an actual email from the person that's sending to me. That takes like 5-10 seconds maximum. And then you can act on that email. If it's not valid, you delete it. If you're not sure it's valid, then you can go verify it through another source. Like I said, I will go to my TD Bank and I verify it through my own secure access. Never verify it in the email. Never click on the links if you doubt. Just delete it. And that goes for anything. When you get weird texts, just delete it. If you get weird phone calls and messages, just delete it. In this day and in time, you need to be more vigilant about, if you doubt, just delete. Password manager, try 5 accounts, get familiar with it, and then you will know you're doing your part, right? There's layers of security that you can add to your workday, and these are the simple ones as a human firewall you can add. And then if you follow the Wi-Fi practices, you'll secure your data. And you won't have to worry about it being compromised by something as simple as using a coffee Wi-Fi location. And multi-factor, it's easy to enable these on all the software applications you use. So just go into those accounts, go into the security settings and enable multi-factor. And it's just that easy. And then you can know, all right, I've done the steps that just make my life easier. And I can say I've done my part and it didn't even take that much time. And it won't. So every day you log into your systems, if you follow those steps, you will have done your part. And that's all that we ask of you, because that's all you can do. And so when it comes to working from home, it's the same thing. There's a few other steps, but if you don't have the access to do this, you can get a little help from outside sources, from your IT professionals or from the managed service providers, because they offer a lot of services and support in this area. But what's important is whenever you see a software update, do those immediately, because that's where the vulnerabilities occur in the software or the applications that you're using. When you're at home and you're logging in, make sure your Wi-Fi has security passwords that are not the default passwords that are given to you by your provider. So also use WPA2 or WPA3 as your security, and change your router password as well. And that's on your unit that has been provided to you by your provider. If you don't know how to do that, you phone your provider and you ask them to help you. They will help you. And it's crucial that you change those passwords. They cannot be the default passwords, because I can log into TELUS. If I have TELUS as a provider, I can log online and I can find that password, that router password, and then I know how to hack into it if I know what that's the provider you use, because I can just check the Wi-Fi, right? It's so easy. Some of it's so transparent for a hacker, and that's where you have to do your part, where you go, okay, if I just change these default passwords, that's going to be me doing my part to work securely from home. And if you haven't used virtual private network, that's where you would use that from a device that you're allowed to use for work, and you can use that in a coffee shop, because that tunnels your device to the network organization that you work for, and it protects you. So it protects your data. So you could work from a hotel with your device if you use VPN, but not if you don't. So if you don't understand VPN, we can give you more information about that. Or if your organization has it, then you use it for those type of scenarios, especially. So we really do encourage these bullet points. And if you need a list from this, we can give that to you as well. Happy to share more information or a little bit more detail if you need any of that to be able to understand how to apply it. But I want to be able to circle back to why we do this. And it is to retain customer trust. You offer services to your clients, you collect data from your clients, your customers, and you have them because you offer a service that you believe is valuable to them, and they use your services because they believe it's valuable to them. And trust is one of them. There's a reason they use your services, because they trust you. And that means they trust you with all of the information they give you. And so you don't want to ruin that customer trust, because small organizations who have a cyber breach, in 6 months, a high percentage of them go out of business because they lose their client trust, and clients don't want to go back. And you don't want to have that. Why? We can do the preventative measures so we can maintain and know that we're doing right by our client. And more than anything, if you can leave from here today and be a security champion for your organization, you can make the difference by keeping this conversation going, asking your colleagues to come and do a session like this so they can meet their annual cybersecurity awareness training requirements, and also so that you can all get on the same page to understand what's required of you. It's easy to do if you just, bring it to the table and ask with curiosity, so that everyone can go, well, I didn't know, I don't know, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you have to know, but we can start the conversation and continue the conversation so there can be more knowledge amongst your team, so that everyone can understand what is the steps they can take so they can do their part for the organization. Because it isn't about lock the front door, put on the alarm system, we've done our part as employees, we're good. It isn't that anymore. And it's not what we expected, but this is where we're at in today's climate. And we have to every day log into our systems with a new set of eyes and diligence and accountability. And I believe that's an easy step with the tools we gave you today to be able to implement that tomorrow. And if you don't know how to do that, ask your manager and they can help you set that up. Like, it's an easy do, and they would be excited to see you taking initiative like that, because they would know how valuable that is for you if you're trying to protect the data for your organization. So that finishes my session with you. And if you have any questions, I would love to keep this conversation going. If you need me to elaborate on anything, I'd be happy to do that as well, because I kind of sped through some things, but I'd like to be able to explain anything that needs more information. So anything that you need clarification on?
Yeah, and thank you, Sonia. We did have a question come in from Rob. It was during the part where we were talking about the reconnaissance that some of these more sophisticated operations will do, looking at like your website and pictures and employee lists. And Rob asks, what is the best practice to setting up out of office notifications, as usually the email includes our name, title, and phone number?
Ah, right, exactly. So if you put on that, we call it a tinfoil hat, you can put on that where you be a little bit more cautious on how much information you need to push out there. And you don't have to put out all of that information. You just don't, but it's up to you if you can, because again, for example, companies have policies and branding, for example, where everything has to be in their email signature. So I can't tell you can't do it if that's your company policy, but if it isn't, then yes, don't give away the all of the information that's required. Just give one email address, and that's okay. And I appreciate your concern, because at the end of the day, we're not going to get away from publicly advertising our company email addresses or company phone numbers. We won't. This is just the way we operate. So instead, just be a bit more defensive on it, knowing this is already public information, or I have to put this in my email because this is the way we do business in North America, right? But the hackers, of course, know this. So you just know that's why we ask you on the preventative end to look at your email with an extra set of caution, because that is going to be the part that you can play in navigating where that can be put to a stop, so that if you do get something that's suspicious, you can double check and go, oh, look at the spelling. There's an extra I on that email address. Delete, right? Oh, that logo looks fuzzy. Delete. So that's where we say be preventative, because at the end of the day, we still have to do business, and we have to do it the way that is effective for us. And a lot of it is public facing, and we can't get away from that, and nor should we. We can't be driven by the behavior of bad actors like these hackers. We just can't.
I actually have seen a couple of instances that relate to this. One was where we had an employee that was on vacation, and I think the CEO was on vacation as well, and somebody impersonated the CEO, exactly what you mentioned. They made an email address that was just very close to the CEO's email address, like one character off in the domain, and they emailed the employee, and they asked for something. I think it was like transferring money from one account to another. Luckily the employee was able to identify that that's not the right address, and also they had a procedural guard in place, which was, we don't approve transfers of funds just based on emails, right? We need to confirm that in person, or by a phone call, that sort of stuff too, right? Because people are going to find out you're on vacation sometimes, and they're going to use that information against you. But something simple like saying, hey, we don't move money if we don't verify by voice or in person, that
Yeah.
stops that in its tracks, right? And I think also helping people understand why those policies and procedures are in place. It's all part of that security culture we're trying to build, so they understand, why would we add this extra step? Like that's a pain. It may save you one day, right? So super, super important.
Yeah, and Ty, you bring up such a valuable point. These policies and procedures, you might not have any in your organization, but as you leave the session today and you're curious, going, well, I really actually don't know. How would we know to prevent, that kind of unauthorized request? That's a question you get to ask. And that's a really good question you can ask your CEO or your manager. And if they don't have an answer, that's where you can easily say, what could we do something? Because I think this could be a risk. This could be a gap in our business model. And then you can be that champion, that advocate for taking this step of security to a place that your company would really value. Because it would maybe not be you, but maybe another employee would go, oh, I'll give them that information because they just feel like they're being obedient and they have to comply. And so if there's those policies in place, then you know your colleague is going to follow those procedures, and then you've all done your part to secure your organization with those kind of type of transactions that could be at risk. Because a lot of organizations do email records and client records to each other and outside vendors. So there's a lot of moving parts here to your organization that you can't control, but inside your organization you can have these policies and procedures up so that that can stop the fraudulent activities from these external bad actors. So I
Exactly
hope
that.
that helped.
Yeah, that the cultural part is really, really huge, and I think it helps to relate it to other industries as well. It's sometimes not quite as tangible when it comes down to like technology and IT, but if we worked at like a taxi company, we're an employee there, and we noticed that like a bunch of our cars have like bald tires on them. It's we need to speak up and help other people understand, because if our cars are having accidents all the time, people aren't going to want to do business with us, right? It's kind of the same thing. And it's something that takes shifting, right? Not everybody is going to be invested in that culture of security right away. It's going to take time and some encouragement, and you might have to nudge a manager, or help your coworker better understand, or get more people to do annual training, that sort of thing. But it's really, really important. But that being said, are there any other questions before we wrap up? I don't see any others in the chat. All right, I think that's it. Yeah, so a quick review of the upcoming training. Again, check out our smartdolphins.com/training page. There's a lot more sessions scheduled for the next couple of weeks. And if you'd like to contact us and speak more or about more specifics, we're always happy to do a quick free consultation. And we also do private training sessions as well. So that's often actually quite useful, to be able to have a session where you can sort of more openly ask maybe sensitive questions, or relate actual close calls or events that you've seen within your organization, and get more sort of specific feedback on those as well. And not just for cybersecurity, but we do everything from office training to managing your tasks and to-dos and everything in between.
Awesome.